Hello my lovelies. Well, what I want to talk about in this video is some people's need to believe in things when there's absolutely no evidence to show that that belief is justified or exists within reality. Now, what I'm talking about in this specific case is this small group of people who are going around trying to create a new satanic panic. Now, what I mean by a new satanic panic is this has been going on. It happens every 10-15 years. A new group of people come around and start deciding that they want to create a new satanic panic. And the ones that are doing it at the moment are a woman called Janice Archer, and a man who's been doing it for a while is called John Wedger, an ex-Met police officer. Now, I'm not going to go into the force and the ways and whatnots, because I've done that in a previous video about Janice Archer and the fact that, I'm sorry, red hot pokers inserted into it on more than one occasion. She wouldn't even be, it would be amazing that she could go round in a wheelchair and still be alive, never mind walking around with a big smile on her face shouting through a megaphone. But anyway, what I get, and I see this a lot when this question is asked, where is the evidence? I mean, if it's so rife, evidence will be there. You couldn't hide it if it's as rife and global as they claim it is. And I always get people who come on saying, no, I believe it does exist, and lots of people have said it does exist, and they've said they're victims of it or survivors of it. But the fact is, they're not bringing the evidence. There should be physical evidence on the bodies of scarring. And also the question is, if these abusers, SRA abusers, are so dangerous and lethal and control the world, why are they allowing someone like Janice Archer or John Wedger to live? Surely they'd take them out with no problem at all. But they'll always have some kind of cute answer for that. Anyway, why do people believe things when there's absolutely no evidence and take people on the word? Well, what it reminds me of is the famous, some will say one of the greatest hoaxes ever, the Cottingley fairies. Now, I'm having to do this from memory, so I might get the date wrong, but it was around about 1914 in Cottingley in Yorkshire. And two little girls, a 16-year-old girl, and I think it's 16-year-old girl, that was Elsie Wright, and Frances Griffiths, if I remember their names right. Frances Griffiths, she was 10 or 9 at the time. They were getting told off when they came back from a stream, or what was called in Yorkshire then a beck, at the bottom of the garden. Wet because Frances kept on slipping. She was only young, kept on slipping into the beck and getting wet. So they'd explain it away by they were playing with the fairies, and that's how she slipped. And they were getting jeered. So one night, Elsie, the elder of the two girls, dreamt up an idea to stop the skidding, and she made cutouts of fairies and put them in a line as if they were dancing, and produced this, what is now iconic image. Now, we look at that nowadays and think it's laughable how anyone could have fallen for that as genuine, but people for decades believed that was genuine. They really believed it. So how can they be drawn into it? I mean, many that didn't and said it was a load of rubbish, but it's amazing what the experts who believed in it were saying. They were saying things like, as Elsie Wright pointed out in Latch, they said they could see the wings moving on the fairies, and said all that was the wind was making them dither in the breeze. Also, that they could see blood going through the veins when they looked into it of the fairies' wings. All total nonsense. And there was another one, this one. and that's Elsie with the gnome. Now, look at that again and look at Elsie's hand. That's not a normal hand, so there's obviously trickery going on there. And amazingly enough, many years later, see, the Cottingley fairies was not proven to be a fake. It was when Elsie and Frances, as very old ladies, decided to cough up and admit it had been a fake, that it was confirmed once for all. And I think it was in the 80s they confirmed it. But this is what Frances, who was the little girl in the first photo, this is what she had to say about the fact that people actually believed that the photographs were real.
And I can't understand it to this day why people were taken in. They wanted to be taken in. Because people often say to me, don't you feel ashamed that you've made all these poor people look fools? They believed in you. But I don't, because they wanted to believe. Look at this photograph. That fairy's all out of drawing. That leg doesn't belong to that fairy. And somebody pointed it out in the newspaper. And one of our dear believers said, well, fairies aren't like humans. They haven't got bodies like we have, or a skeleton and arms and legs. They sort of put it together with thought. And sometimes it doesn't come out right. We didn't have to tell a lie about it at all, because always somebody came out to justify it. It was very embarrassing because, I mean, two village kids with a brilliant man like Conan Doyle, well, we could only just keep quiet.
Now, do you see something interesting there? She's getting it, she's knocking the nail right on the head there when she says people wanted to believe. They wanted to believe so bad that they never had to justify themselves or explain any discrepancies away, because someone would always come and explain away. And that's what happens with these SRA satanic panic cases. You saying about John Wedger, you saying about Janessa Archer, and you know, you raise questions about, well, where's the evidence, or you raise questions about Janessa Archer's claims being totally unbelievable, and how she keeps on adding to a story, making it more and more exaggerated as she goes along. You'll always get someone jumping in and trying to cover for her because they believe in SRA. But it's one thing to believe that little girls have taken photographs of fairies at the bottom of the garden, and another thing to actually believe that there are people going around torturing and murdering children in the most graphic details that Jeanette Archer and John Wedger can come out with, and Wilfred Wong. Now, why is it a different scenario? Well, because fairies are harmless, but to want to believe in fairies and elves and gnomes, there's no harm in that. If you want to believe in that, it makes life magical. To me, it's like believing in a god or gods, or you know, whatever. It's something magical. If you want to believe it makes life more interesting. Believe it. But when you're talking about someone wanting to believe that children are being treated in such horrendous ways, that's what I find disturbing. And as I say to people, I say, you want to believe it, you need to believe it. And you almost get the feeling that they'd be totally devastated if it was proven once and for all that this was not a global pandemic. There weren't warehouses of children being done away with and tortured. They'd be disappointed because they, what I would call twisted and disturbed view of the world, well, that would be taken from under their feet. I'd rather believe that it doesn't happen and it doesn't exist until I'm showing evidence that it does. I can't see why anyone would. And before anyone says, oh, there's many survivors come out, no, these survivors come out right. And I'm sorry, you can pick holes in all their accounts that they make. It all starts, I remember this started with Michelle Remembers, a book called Michelle Remembers, a Canadian book, which started the first major satanic panic. And that was debunked very quickly. They could find out where she was when she was a child and where she wasn't, and it didn't match up with the claims in the book. And also there's this thing of recovered memories. A lot of people say, oh, I didn't remember, but then I remembered. Recovered memories. You're on iffy ground there, right? Recovered memories. Very iffy ground. Just because you suddenly start thinking you're remembering something doesn't mean that it's actually fact what you're remembering. And I don't believe that half the people that make these claims do believe that's recovered memories. They're just after attention seeking, and sadly it does happen. But some are just blatant attention seekers. They need that attention, and that they're craving that sympathy, as if they're someone great because they went through this experience, or they're brave, they're a warrior. So people will tell lies, they will. But until someone comes forward, of course there's going to be somewhere in the world something that's going on like that. There's bound to be. But it's a big difference between that saying that it can be happening in some parts of the world to actually saying it's happening everywhere, which the Jeanette Archers, the John Wedges are trying to convince you. If it's happening everywhere and it's been going on for decades and decades and decades, some of them reckon it's been going on for hundreds of years, you know, the evidence would be there. You wouldn't be having to ask for evidence. It would be there, you'd see it. And it wouldn't be questionable, well, is that actually satanic what they're producing as evidence? Because a lot of the time they'll produce things and say that it's satanic, which isn't. It can either be under the term Wiccan or witchcraft or ritual. Now, I'm not an expert on Wiccans, witchcraft or anything. I'm not into anything like that. But people will say completely different. A Satanist, a Luciferian or whatever is a completely different branch of, would you call it the occult? I don't know. I'm not an expert on what it is, but I know one thing. I haven't seen this evidence that they're doing these horrendous things to children and putting women in cellars and things like that and getting them pregnant for new victims. But yeah, I thought I'd mention that. Just that, you know, those two little girls fooled the world for over half a century. Well, they didn't actually fool them, and I'll rephrase that. They didn't actually fool the world at all. The world fooled itself. It allowed itself to be fooled by those fairy photographs. And we have to be careful when you're talking about SRA. Certain people, but I think the vast 99.9% of the public don't buy it. You'd have to give them actually clear evidence, even though Jeanette's saying it's a global awakening and all that. It isn't, Jeanette, love, dream on. But come with the evidence. Someone was saying Jeanette went to the police. To me, in my comments, well, Barbara O'Hare, a genuine victim of abuse, not SRA, she found out the police knew nothing about it. So unless Jeanette can produce evidence, and John Wedger, because he's well in with Jeanette Archer and promotes her, unless they can bring this evidence and say, here, well, I reported to the police, which they'll have the paperwork. Or if they haven't got it, they can get it by a be careful with this, I'm saying SRA, SAR request, easy to mix them up. Subject access request. They could get the paperwork anyway, but for some reason they never do. I don't know why, to you darlings. But anyway, before you start believing something, have the sense to ask. Kind of see evidence. This kind of see what you're basing your claims on, not just people pulling claims out of the backside and claiming to be survivors or whatever. Ask them, well, if you had red hot pokers inserted into you on more than one occasion, how the hell are you still alive? How the hell are you walking around? How did you manage to have children? You know, you ask questions like that. But there'll always be people who don't want those don't want that clarification, simply because they need to believe it. I mean, I say believing in fairies is harmless, wanting and needing to believe that horrendous things like that are being done to children. Or you need to sit down and have a good talk with yourself, or get a therapist and have a good talk with them about why you need that in your life. So it's all to leave it there, my lovelies. Bye bye for now.